If I could invite you to remain standing, and we'll open the debate to the floor.
John McMullen from Brighton Charitable Group. I'd like to draw two themes together and ask a question, if I may, Margaret. Yes. You made a point, and I think it's a very valid point, that we need Northern Ireland getting back to work, and we are where we are in skills levels. So as we move towards higher value jobs, Green New Deal is clearly a very valuable asset early on. You mentioned public reform and making a public sector more can-do. Green New Deal has been driven by society, IOD, CBI, NICFA, Farmers Union, Congress of Trade Unions and organisations like Bryson. No government departments around the table. They've become an impediment and gave up its £4 million in the current year. How can you make a body that seems to be can't do, can do?
After being 3 years within a department, that is, shall we say, it's not insurmountable, because I believe it can be done. I think you have to streamline. We all know that Northern Ireland is 70% dominant public sector, and we need to rebalance the economy. I don't think anybody's in any doubt about that. But you're talking about the can-do culture within the civil service and within officials. And I think that is one of the most difficult areas that I found during my period of time as minister, because they could always think of 100 ways not to do something. And that is simply a historical legacy from being in charge, even though when there were direct rule ministers here. So I don't think anybody disagrees with that. But I think they have to realise, number one, who is in charge, but equally, we as political representatives have to appreciate and understand that we're supposed to be coming forward with the ideas, trying to change their mindset and have capable ideas that are worthy of implementation, whether it's in the economy, whether it's in planning, whether it's in housing. And I think we did prove some of those areas where it was possible when we were faced with an economic downturn and a loss of capital receipts. Thereby I was forced to do other things, and that was lever in more private finance, as you well recall yourself, into housing, and thereby increase the number of social housing starts, thereby helping our construction industry. It was by bringing in new thinking from outside the civil service, from yourselves, from people in the business commercial world, and also saying these things are possible. Please listen to these people. Please use their expertise. You will recall that I brought in the European Investment Bank to provide funding and to provide their expertise with the housing associations, with Clanmill, and there's one housing development quite near here that was built through European Investment Bank money along with local money. And I think when you bring those people in from Europe, from London, they bring new ideas, and they bring their finance as well, which is very important at a time of an economic downturn. And I think you have to prove as politicians, because there's a duty, a moral responsibility on us to do that. But it is a difficult one, as I found, and I know Alex finds the same.
Margaret, good morning. My name is Peter Spratt, Anderson Spratt Group, Marketing and Communications. Thank you for your presentation this morning. I greatly welcome your focus on streamlining of the public estate and the opportunities that reside within. And indeed, you, along with a number of your former executive colleagues, have identified public expenditure as the key, not just a key, but the key lever in terms of economic policy moving forward. But I'm just wondering what discretion does actually attach to that lever in terms of a local executive. I've had the opportunity to ask this question of 3 ministers of the outgoing executive over the course of the past year under the auspices of the Chamber, and I'm delighted to have the opportunity to ask it of you now. We're advised by whichever economist you most believe that public expenditure, public pay within the public expenditure, overall quantum is amounting to 52% of public expenditure. We're also advised that a local executive has virtually zero discretion over the level of public sector pay because it is the subject of national agreements. And national agreements have been sort of used in certain responses to me in the past as it's a national agreement, can't do naught about that. Similarly, yesterday, in terms of local government expenditure, we had the almost embarrassing revelation from to the private sector of 65 pence a mile being paid by local councils and perceived as being acceptable by certain spokespeople on behalf of that yesterday. Quite outrageous. So I just wonder to what extent, if public expenditure is indeed the key and principal lever, what discretion will attach to an incoming executive maybe to address this if public services and public reform is really to be appropriately streamlined?
Thank you very much, Peter. You're absolutely right. The only financial lever available to the executive is one of public expenditure. We get the block grant from London, and we don't have any powers for taxation. We don't have any control over currency or taxation rates. We don't even have control over our benefit rates. That's all done from London. But the most important thing, and we said this some 2 years ago, if the public expenditure lever is not driving the economy and is not effecting change in a time of an economic downturn, then was the time to re-look at the areas that would be job-rich, that would bring incentives to the economy, and therefore there was a need to reprioritise the budget. Now, others disagreed with us, and we tried again. I believe there is now that opportunity to do that with the new budget bill, which will face the Assembly and the Executive come June of this year. The other area is we have now, and we're in the midst of a consultation period on corporation tax. And I think that is another financial lever that will be available to us. That consultation was from the 24th of March to the 24th of June. And I know as members of the Chamber, you have particular areas in that. Because of the issue of double subsidy and the Azores Agreement, it means there will be a downside to the block grant. I believe that that can only be done on a gradual phase basis. But I do believe that the Northern Ireland Executive needs other financial levers apart from public expenditure in order to kickstart this economy and help the private sector. And thereby, when you help the private sector, you're helping the wider economy and bringing benefit to the wider population. And you mentioned local government and the fact that many local government workers were receiving larger amounts than other sectors for expenses. I think there needs to be a whole realignment within the public sector in relation to that, where everybody is probably receiving the same amount. Because I also feel that people should not be out of pocket whenever they're in their work, because I'm sure in the private sector people receive expenses for doing work as well. But there just needs to be a general realignment with a standard rate right throughout Northern Ireland.
Thank you. If I could just quickly ask, in terms of your 25-year vision, in terms of what you've just said, do you feel it appropriate that public sector remuneration and all attaching the same should more obviously be the responsibility of a regional administration than that of a national agreement?
Well, I think that requires, and comes back into the whole area of a social contract between the actual employers, the employees and the trade unions. And they were able to do it whenever the south of Ireland was in a healthy state, and that came about. They then got national agreements. But if I think we're working with our own economy, there probably is a need for local, national or local regional agreements. But I would have to say that people should not be at a financial disadvantage, and we have to be very careful about that as well.
Thank you.
Can I invite another question? Is it Angela?
Hi, Margaret. Angela McGowan from the Northern Bank.
Yes.
Margaret, when times are very tight and there's clearly a lot of restrictions on public expenditure, and we're expecting our students, they're going to be our future in terms of the economic future, and we expect them to pay the university fees. How does your party feel about introducing some local revenue streams? Because I would say everyone in this room could afford to pay for their prescriptions or could make a bit of a contribution towards water rates. How does the SDLP feel on these issues?
Well, first of all, I'm quite clear that those who are already disadvantaged should not be forced to pay for others and for themselves, because they don't have the financial wherewithal. In relation to water rates, we have been quite clear about that. I think along with other parties, we're saying no to new separate water rates. But if you look at our document about partnership and economic recovery, we cite how it is possible to deal with the deficit in the budget, the 400 billion over 4 years, and also still have money to invest in the economy. And those other areas, shared future housing bond, there was another one for local government borrowing, local government bonds. So there are other areas rather than resorting to water rates. I'm quite happy to have a discussion with you afterwards.
I was just saying, yeah, I actually think we should, because I think at the 2 other events that I attended, it was certainly very, very deliberately dodged by Martin McGuinness. Peter Robinson didn't touch it. But I think if you want to go into real politics in Northern Ireland, all the political parties are going to face up to the fact that there are some quite harsh decisions have to be made.
Yes.
And I think it's certainly something we can't ignore further down the line. So it's happy to talk about it.